Today in our core conversations, we're going to talk about immigration and the Bible. A recent National Public Radio report indicated that immigration is shaping up to be one of the most contentious and emotional topics in the 2016 presidential race. And I think that's right. There's a lot of emotion around this issue, and we've been hearing candidates talk about building walls on our southern border or fences. We've been hearing about people suggesting that we might change the U.S. Constitution so that people born on American soil are not automatically American citizens unless their parents were American citizens. All kinds of conversations around this. We've been hearing about the president who signed executive orders related to immigration, and yet those were stopped by the courts. And so we hear about this, but most of us don't really know a lot about the issues related to immigration reform. Now, I want to mention just in this brief conversation a couple of things. The primary issue that we're talking about in immigration reform is what to do with undocumented immigrants who are in the United States, and also how do you protect our borders. I want to focus on the undocumented immigrants in the United States. There's about 11.3 million of them in the U.S., as near as we can tell. 40% of those came on a legal visa, so they came here legally as students or on a work visa or as on a tourist visa. And then they stayed after their visa expired. You stay 6 months after your visa expires. If you're caught, you're deported and you can't apply to come back for 3 years. If you are here for more than a year on an expired visa, you're excluded from coming back to the United States for 10 years. And so some of these students who grew up here in the country and going to school, or some who fell in love and weren't able to get a resident card initially, stayed, and they would be forced to leave and not come back for 10 years if they were caught. So the question is, what do we do with these folks? And of course, the largest category, or at least a large category of those immigrants who are here undocumented, are from Mexico. They've crossed the border, they've risked their lives, they've given most of what they had in order to come here, to come to a land they believe that offered them promise and hope. That just reminds you of what you already know. All of us watching this video in America are immigrants, right? We all came from somewhere else. Even Native Americans came here 13,000 years ago on the land bridge that was formed during the last ice age across the Bering Strait. So even Native Americans were immigrants 13,000 years ago, but most of us came in the last 300 years. Our forebears came. And so we're a nation of immigrants. We're a nation who captures our character and our hopes and dreams by a statue in New York City, right on Liberty Island. I was just there a week ago, and the Statue of Liberty is what the immigrants who came to America after 1886 first saw when they came on their steamships. And then that wonderful poem by Emma Lazarus captures so well what we have really seen as part of our national character. When Lady Liberty says these words, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." What promise, what amazing words. And yet, even though we have this national dream of being a place that welcomes and takes immigrants, and our forebears were among those immigrants, every generation has struggled in America with the immigrants who are coming after them. And we have a word for that. It's called xenophobia. Xenos is the Greek word for stranger, foreigner, alien, and phobia, of course, our fear of those who are coming after us. And sometimes those were fears based upon their religion. Sometimes it was fears based upon their appearance. Sometimes from the countries that they came from. We were afraid they were going to take our jobs. We were afraid they might hurt us or threaten our national security. And so we've seen this. I think back to the 1850s when the Irish were coming in droves because of the famine in Ireland. And the fears that began to develop that the Irish were actually coming to take over America, that they were sent by the Pope secretly, that this was a strategy or a plan to take America, which was predominantly a Protestant country, and turn it into a Catholic country. And so out of that, there came a party, a political party, they came to be known popularly as the Know Nothing Party, who sought to make sure that Catholics didn't win election. And we know that same sentiment prevailed all the way until 1960 when President Kennedy was running for office. And we know in the 1880s there was a concerted effort to stop Chinese from coming to America, even though they had come to build our railroads, and they were welcomed after they fled their own country under oppression there. 14 million Chinese who came, and they came to be known as the Yellow Peril. And there was a great concern that they no longer be allowed to come to our country. And so a law was passed in 1882 that forbid Chinese from immigrating to the United States except under extenuating circumstances. That law prevailed for 60 years. We go into 1920s. In the 1920s, after the Bolshevik Revolution, people were coming from Russia, people who were fleeing oppression there under the Soviet regime. And yet there began to be a fear that these people who spoke a different language, who'd come from Soviet Russia, might be Bolsheviks in hiding among the immigrants to take over our country and to lead a communist revolt. And so as a result of that, in 1924, there was a piece of immigration law that was passed that actually didn't forbid, it just greatly constrained the number of undesirable, quote, undesirable immigrants from coming to the U.S. And that included Greeks, it included Italians, Spaniards, it included the Jews, and those from Russia. And so their numbers were curtailed, and instead it opened wide the doors for the British, the French, and the Germans to come to the United States. That law wasn't thrown out until 1965 under President Johnson, who went to the Statue of Liberty to sign the law into place to say this previous law did not reflect our best ideals as Americans. What does the Scripture say about aliens in our midst, about immigrants? And what's interesting is the Bible is a book that largely is the story of immigrants. So Abraham and Sarah are asked by God to leave their homeland in Mesopotamia and to move to a land they'd never been to before, to the land of Canaan. And then eventually moving to Egypt, forced to move to Egypt. And then they came back to Canaan and traveling around under various kingdoms and in various countries or nationalities of the time. And then after that, the Israelites, Israel's descendants, his 12 sons and their children and grandchildren, all forced to move to Egypt because there wasn't enough food in the land of Canaan. The same reasons that the Irish came to America and many others came for greater opportunity and to be able to feed themselves in Egypt. Eventually, of course, xenophobia took over in Egypt, and the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. God delivers the slaves from Egypt. And at Mount Sinai, where God is giving the law, we read these words. God says, and he's telling them, he's preparing them for the move into the promised land. And he says, when an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as you love yourself. For you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Now, this doesn't tell us what our immigration policy has to be. The Bible isn't a policy manual like that. But instead it tells us something about the heart and character of God. For in the ancient Near East, the aliens were never treated like the citizens in a country. They were always treated as second class. And yet here the Scripture says that God cares for the aliens in our midst. So whatever policies we develop as a nation, when we look at these 11.3 million people, most of whom are working, especially those who come from Mexico, take the jobs that many of us as Americans don't want. And so they're employed, they're producing, they're also consuming, they are contributing to our economy, but these are people who are doing typically hard labor. So we're talking about the agricultural industry, we're talking about meat packing, we're talking about construction and even housekeeping. And so we're talking about people who are working, having children here, growing up here. What are we going to do with them? And whatever it is that we do should be marked by compassion, by mercy, by a concern for the alien in our midst. I don't have the answers to exactly what we should do when it comes to immigration. What I do want to encourage you is not to give in to xenophobia that fears the people who are different from us, that makes blanket statements about them being criminals, or that is worried that they're going to somehow take our jobs. But instead to look at these people and say, what would God have us do to care for the people, the aliens in our midst? I invite you to pray during this election season about these key issues, to find out more, and then to come to a conclusion about your own views on these issues in the light of your faith. And as we do that, I think we will find that we are welcoming the stranger in our midst.